So, what is Angular? Angular is a framework for building dynamic single page applications. Obviously, if you're a beginner, this definition may not be making complete sense. So, to make sense out of this definition, let us start off by understanding how a simple web application works. Let's say that you have visited an e commerce website and you've entered this URL shop.com/electronics. Or maybe you've just clicked the link. The browser would then send the request to the server requesting for a list of electronic items. The server would process the request and then it might query the database requesting for a list of records, which in this case are electronics. Once retrieved, it would send back the response back to the client or the browser. Now, back in the days, we used to use technologies like PHP, ASP.NET, Ruby on Rails, or Django to dynamically generate the HTML and send it back to the client or the browser. So this HTML have the data that is wrapped with necessary HTML or presentation logic so that it can be rendered on the browser. But there are a lot of problems with this approach. Can you pause the video and try to make a guess? First of all, we will have issues with the performance because generating dynamic HTML is very resource intensive. And if there is huge amount of traffic coming to the server, it's going to demand a lot of resources, impact the performance, increase the costs, and eventually it might impact the user experience as well because web pages might be rendering very slow. There might be some latency. Another issue we can think of is complexity of the code base. The backend developers have to write code to generate HTML dynamically, and this will increase the complexity of the code base and so the maintainability of the code base as well. Also, the backend developers need to learn front end technologies as well to do their job. And thirdly, and most importantly, there would be compatibility issues. Now, HTML can be understood by a browser, but what if the client is a mobile application? Or what if some other application wants to read the data? Well, if an application is requesting for data, we cannot send them HTML. They have to do that additional work of removing all the presentation part, remove all the HTML tags, and extract the data, which is not practical at all. So, do we have a solution to this problem? Well, how about we just send the data and let the client handle the presentation part? Would that solve the problem? Let's take a look. So, instead of sending HTML, we would now send JSON. If you're wondering what is JSON, it is just simply data in a standardized format that every other client are willing to understand. For example, if we are requesting for a list of electronics, then the JSON response from the server might look something like this. And all the clients are equipped to understand that. For example, mobile app developers might write some code which will parse through this JSON and extract the data that they need. Similarly, some other application can use some existing libraries to easily read the data from the JSON response. And nowadays, all the server-side technologies like Java, Django, PHP, Node.js, which is very popular choice these days, are only sending JSON data and they're not bothered about dynamically generating or including presentation logic in the response. But we have a problem here. This JSON can be read by a mobile app or some other application or some other client. But what about browsers? We cannot just straight away show this JSON data on the browser and expect the user to have a very good experience. They want to see the data in a visually pleasing manner, and they want to be able to interact with the application with links, buttons, forms, etc. So we still need to have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript somewhere so that we can accomplish that. How do we accomplish that? Let's take a look. So let's say that the user has visited shop.com. The moment the customer visits that site, the browser would send the request to the server requesting for index.html file. This time, the server would respond back with all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files that you ever need. And for all the subsequent requests, it's only going to respond back with just the data in the JSON format. When you visit a traditional website, every time you click a link or go to a particular page, the browser reloads the entire page, sending a request to the server and getting a new HTML page in response. However, in this case, the browser loads the entire application structure, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, everything just once. After that, when you click on a link or navigate through the pages, the page doesn't reload. Instead, the application dynamically updates the content using JavaScript. It dynamically updates the JSON content or data using the JavaScript, which is already present. So essentially, it acts like a single page application. Just like you have a mobile app running on Android, you're going to have this application built using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on a browser. And just like your mobile app doesn't need a reload every time you interact with it, even this doesn't require the page reload every time the customer interacts with the application on the browser. Some of the examples of single page applications are Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and there are many other. Instagram is also a single page application. As you scroll through the posts, you're not going to see the page getting reloaded. That's because it is working in this model. The first time you visit facebook.com, it has already downloaded all the required HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And for all the subsequent requests, server is only responding back with the data in JSON format, and it is being populated on various components using JavaScript. But the real question is, how are we going to build these HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Are we going to literally use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build these applications? It doesn't make sense. It's going to take unimaginable amount of effort, time, and energy, and it is just impossible. That's where Angular comes into picture. Angular is a framework. What is a framework? It's just a bunch of libraries or pre-written code which will make the life of developer easy so that they don't have to write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript from scratch. And we use Angular for building these dynamic single page applications. If you want to build a car, it doesn't make sense for you to build each and every component from scratch. You want to get components from various vendors and assemble them in a manner that you like. Similarly, you're going to use Angular framework to build the applications as you desire. Hope it makes sense. I'll see you next.